grade 8. In today's lesson, we will all learn the importance of having the same size and the same shape. In mathematics, we call it congruent. Let me guide you in traveling with another learning in the words of mathematics. In order for you to meet this word congruent, let us start with our notebook, where we can spot many interesting things which are exactly the same. As we say, congruent. Look around you. Observe around your house. Do you notice some parts of the house or even things which are exactly the same? Can you explain why it is important that these things are the same? Complete the table below by providing the following in each column. Activity number 1. I spot no difference. In column number 1, what are these things which you think are the same? Example, plates. Column number 2. How are these things the same? Example, our plates have the same sizes and shapes. Column number 3. Why is it important that they are the same? Example, it's important that they have exactly the same sizes and shapes so they can all easily fit in our dish rack. After doing your first activity, you have now realized the importance of having the same things inside your house. In math, there is a concept that teaches us about triangles that should look exactly the same. This is called triangle congruence. But before we talk about triangle congruence, what does the word congruent really mean in math? Congruent as a symbol, this is the symbol for congruent. This symbol has two concepts. Did you notice that the symbol of congruent combines the symbol of equal and similar? It means that the literal meaning of congruent is equal in measure and same or similar in shape. And that is the difference of equal and congruent. The word equal is usually numerical, while congruent has shape or figure. I will give you some pictures with triangle congruence and its importance and applications, and you try to unlock and discover why they are created like that. Ready? Let's go! Activity number 2. Oh! I see triangles. The truss bridge contains triangles which are the same or congruent. These triangles are all congruent because the point of a truss bridge is to have equal weight controlling lengths to keep the structure up and keep it from falling. Therefore, the triangles should be the same length, shape, and weight to keep the bridge safe for people. Now your turn! Observe pictures number 2 and number 3. You may pause the video in doing this activity. Image number 2. There are many possible reasons here, from aesthetic purposes to the reflection of the sun as a source of solar power. As we all know, roofs, windows, and even walls of the buildings can be designed in such a way that it could be useful when solar panels are installed. Congruency in kites is very important, as some with planes and other aerial designs for flying, where congruency is a must in aerodynamics. And now we have an idea about the importance and uses of triangle congruence from our home to the outside world. And now, let us discuss what is triangle congruence. Two triangles are congruent if and only if their corresponding parts are congruent. In math, if and only if means the definition of congruent triangle is biconditional. And what is biconditional? To understand this better, let's take a recall about if-then statement. Statement 1. If the corresponding parts of triangles are congruent, then the triangles are also congruent. Statement number 2. If triangles are congruent, then their corresponding parts are also congruent. Statement number 2 is the converse of statement number 1. And these two statements are both true. That means it is biconditional. And that's what it meant in if and only if. Now we know. The first statement is the definition of congruent triangle, while the second statement is commonly known as the CBCTC or corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. This is usually the key to prove that the parts of the congruent triangles are also congruent. In short, we need to show that the corresponding parts of triangles are congruent so that we can finally conclude that the triangles are congruent. But wait, you still remember the parts of a triangle? Here is a short review. A triangle has three basic parts: sides, vertices, and angles. We have the three vertices: point P, point R, and point I. Vertex is the point of intersection of two sides in a given triangle. We have the three sides: side PR or RP, side RI or IR, and side EI or IT. Sides are actually line segments that form the triangle. And lastly, we have three angles. We have angle T, angle R, and angle I. Angles are two non-collinear segments or line segments or sides of a triangle. And now, let us talk about corresponding parts of triangles that we should prove congruent in order for us to show that the triangles are also congruent. Let us start with corresponding angles and let us show that these are congruent. Consider the two triangles given. When we say corresponding in math, it means same with equivalent or katumbas in Filipino language. That means we will just name one angle in the first triangle which is equivalent or katumbas on the other triangle. Easy, right? Let's go! Let us start with the angles which have the same measure of 90 degrees. These two angles R and M are obviously equivalent for their share a common property, and that is these have the same measure. Correspondence between two angles is written as angle R corresponds to angle M. And since angle R and angle M have the same measure, meaning these two angles are not only corresponding but also congruent. We already spotted one of three corresponding angles which are congruent. Now let's move on with angles which both measures 60 degrees. We will apply the same principles with the previous one, since angle T and L have the same measures also. So angle T corresponds with angle L. And we can also say that angle T is congruent to angle L, or they have the same measure. And lastly, angles I and A should be corresponding, right? But they do not have measurement. How is this? Yes, they do not have measurement. But observe that these angles have tick marks. We can still conclude that they are corresponding and congruent through tick marks or Roman numerals. These serve as a mark to remind us that the two angles or sides, triangles, or figures are still the same in measurement. Let us move on now and spot the corresponding and congruent sides. Let's again identify the three pairs of corresponding and congruent sides so that we can finally claim and conclude that the two triangles are congruent. Let us start with sides which colors is red. Observe how the figures are drawn. Sides are corresponding based on how the figures was drawn, like side PR and side LM. And these sides are congruent since this both measures 4 cm as given. Take note, in writing two corresponding sides, let's say side PR corresponds with side LM, points T and L, and points R and M have also the corresponding points in the two triangles. Otherwise, if we wish to write side RT, which is written in reverse order, we must also write side LM with the corresponding order. That is to say, side RT corresponds with side ML. The same pattern and rule will be followed in writing the other two pairs of corresponding sides. So we have side RI corresponds to side MA. And these two sides are also congruent since RI and MA measures the same, which is 3 cm. And lastly, we have side TI corresponds to side LA. And these two sides are also congruent since they have both the tick mark or Roman numeral number 2. And now, since we have shown that the three pairs of corresponding sides and angles are congruent, we can now finally conclude that the two triangles are congruent according to the definition of congruent triangles. We could write either of the following to denote congruency between these two triangles. We can write triangle TRI is congruent to triangle LMA. Note that point T on the first triangle and point L on the second triangle are corresponding. Same with R and M and I and A. Otherwise, you write it incorrectly. These are actual congruent triangles. Other than checking their corresponding parts if they are congruent, you can also check congruency by overlapping them. If they will exactly fit in each other, just like this one, therefore, these triangles are congruent. Let's wrap up. Here are our takeaways from the lesson. Congruent as a symbol. This symbol has two concepts, the symbol for equal and similar. The literal meaning of congruent is equal in measure and similar or same in shape. And that is the difference of equal and congruent. Equal is usually numerical, while congruent has shape or figure. The corresponding parts of triangles should be congruent to conclude that the triangles are also congruent. We can still conclude that the triangles are congruent through the use of tick mark or Roman numerals. They serve as a mark to remind us that the two angles or sides of triangles or figures are still the same in measurement. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something today. Remember, math is fun.